I've had a couple of clients ask me recently for some help on some simple pop-ups on book pages. So in this short video, we're going to look at how to generate those pop-ups and use some hover over effects to do some things. So I've got a simple book page here, and I want to display a bubble pointing to each of these buttons on the toolbar as I hover over them. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bubble here. I'll add a simple bubble. I'll point it to one of these objects. Doesn't matter which one I start with. I'll start with this one here. Move it up slightly. And one of the nice things about bubbles on book pages is that they can have a title. So in here, I'm going to put the name of the shape, which is, and then I'm going to have my explanation about it. Whatever I have in there. So there I've got my title. That's insert shape. That's taken from here. And I've got my text for that. And it's going to point to this particular button here, but I only want this to be displayed when I hover over this particular button. So that's what we're going to look at how to do. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide that bubble because I don't want it to be displayed initially. I only want it to be displayed when I hover over. Now to create the hover over effect, I'm actually going to use an active area control. You can achieve the same thing using a shape or even a text box if you want, but the active area is nice and handy because it's already transparent. So I'm going to put this over this particular button here. You can see it says in the middle of it, enter text here. You can ignore that for here. Like many objects in Enable Now, they can hold text and you can do other things with them. So let's say I've got that over there roughly where I want it to appear. And when the user hovers the cursor over that, I want to pop up this bubble here. So that's nice and easy to do. With that active area selected here, and knowing the name of this thing, which is bubble 1, normally I'd rename them to something sensible, but I'll leave it like this for a good reason. I'll show you in a minute. So I know that this is called bubble 1. So it's a bubble 1 object I want to display when they hover over this. So I'll select that active area and go down in the properties to actions. And there's a whole section for actions, and these are the events that can trigger something. And what I want to do here is I'm going to use these two on mouse roll over, on mouse roll out. So here I'm going to click add, and the object I want to have an action against is my bubble 1, and I want to show it. I can show it, I can fade it in, do some other things, but here I just want to show it. And then on mouse roll out, I'm going to take the same bubble and I'm going to hide it. And that's that. And that will now work. If I preview this, you can't see that there's an active area over that, which is what I like because it's basically invisible. But as soon as I hover the cursor over there, that bubble appears. And as soon as I move the cursor out, it disappears again. So very, very simple effect. And this is nice for if you've got a lot of things on the screen like I have here that I want to explain all of them. I don't want to have all of those bubbles displayed all at the same time because they're going to overlap. It's going to be hard to find space for them all. Plus, forcing the user to actually interact with the book page makes them pay a bit more attention to the training instead of just looking at everything already displayed and moving on quickly. So here they'll be able to move along all of these and see each of those in turn. So far so good. But what I also want to do, just for the fun of it here, is I want to draw a box, a rectangle around the button to say, hey, it's this button. This is the one you hovered over, just to kind of reinforce what they're looking at. Just for the fun of it and to show you something different, let's do that. So I'll come out of preview mode again. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this same active area here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a hover over effect to this itself. And that is done if I go down on the active area again. If I go and look at effect here, there's a design rollover and a design click. And that's what do you want the design of this to be? The design being basically everything that's in here. What do you want to change it to when the user hovers over or clicks on it? So here I want the rollover. Now the interesting thing about this is you can't actually change these fields until you've said, yes, I want a rollover effect. So once I've done that, I can then say I want a border color of red on that. So now if I play that back, nothing's actually going to happen like I want it to. So I hover over here, the bubble still pops up, but I'm not getting my border around that. Why not? Because all this effect does is says change the existing border color from whatever it is at the moment to red. And if I go and look at the design section in here, I can see that there is a border color, but the border width is 0, which isn't handy. What I really need to do is set this to something else. I'm going to say 4 because that's the same as simulations, and it draws that around there. Okay, so that's kind of what I have now. But that's obviously not particularly great because now I've got that there all the time, which isn't really what I want. It will turn red when I hover over it now. It changes the existing border to the color I specify for the on rollover effect, but obviously that's not what I want. I don't want a border on there beforehand. So I'm going to cheat here and I'm going to do things the easy way because it allows me to show you a bit of other functionality in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to find the current border color for that, which is this dark gray, and I'm going to change that, and I'm going to go to custom color, choose the dropper tool, click and hold on that, and then drag it over the color you want to use. And I'm going to select the background color of this toolbar. So if I select that as the color, which is now got in here, click OK. Now I do have a border around here still, but it's actually the same color as the background here, so you can't really see it. And then when I hover over, magically, I get my red border around it and I get my bubble popping up. So everything's exactly the way I want it to be. So that's a nice, useful technique that you can do there. However, I'm going to show you another technique with that. I'm going to take the hover over effect here off, and I'm going to take the border color off as well. Border width of 0. That's what I need to do. Okay, so I'm back to where I was, because it might be, in this particular case, I was lucky. I had enough space around the object that I could take the background and it will kind of merge in. But if you've got objects that are very close together, or maybe you've got a background that's not a block color, like I've got here, maybe it's a gradient fill or a picture or something like that, and you can't just choose the same color as the background because the background varies. So what I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to have to insert another object that is going to have a border on it all the time and then show or hide that particular object. So I'm going to go to insert a shape. I'm going to use a rectangle. Now, another quick tip for you. I want this rectangle to be exactly the same size as my active area, so it basically borders it. And I want it to be in exactly the same place. And I could drag it around and it'll snap to the borders, but I'm super lazy. So I'm going to select my active area, control click to select my shape, and then on this alignment menu, I'm going to select that and say I want them to be the same size. So it's now made them the same size, and then I can left align them both, top align them both, and they're in exactly the same position as well. So now I'll start changing this particular shape. This rectangle called rectangle 1. Again, you should give them sensible names. But here, I'm going to give this a border color of red. And I'm going to give it a border width of 4. And I'm not going to bother about the design rollover. I'm not actually going to use that. I'm just going to leave that like that. Oh, I need to make it transparent as well. This will make it transparent. So now I've got my red border. And I want to show that when they hover over. So I'm going to hide it. And then I'm going to basically do the same thing we did with the bubble. When the user hovers over that active area, as well as showing that bubble, I want to show that rectangle as well. So rectangle 1, show, and then here I want to do rectangle 1, hide. Okay, so now what's going to happen when I hover over that, it's going to show the bubble and the highlight as well. So show one more time or preview, show that, and there we go. That's exactly what I want to achieve there. So that's a nice, easy way of doing that. Now, in this particular example, what I did was I used the active area and I just added the rectangle show on and hide onto those as well. But I'll show you another fun technique just to show something else that you can do. These are events and actions on objects. And that's kind of the building block for a lot of things that you can do with SAP Enable Now book pages. So I'm going to show you another interesting feature that we can use here. I'm going to take the rectangle off my active area here. And instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this bubble. And down on the actions for that bubble, you can see that the bubble has a different bunch of actions that are available to it. I'm going to use something very similar. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say when this bubble is displayed, which is the on show, I also want to show this rectangle. Okay, I'm going to show that rectangle. And when it is hidden, I want to hide the rectangle as well. So what I'm doing here is basically kind of like daisy chaining these objects together. When an event happens for one object, i.e. my active area, I'm going to trigger actions against the bubble object. And when something happens to that bubble object, I'm going to use the events on that to trigger something else, which is displaying the rectangle. So this will do exactly the same thing as we just had. I hover over and it shows those. I move out and it hides them again. So that works perfectly, exactly the same way as the previous one did, but I just wanted to show you that additional capability there. Okay, one last thing I'm going to show you with all of this. Actually, I should have had the active area on top of the rectangle. That's why there was a kind of slight flicker to it, because I was moving over the rectangle instead of the active area. This will now work fine, no flicker. Okay, so I'm going to show you one last feature that I like a lot with SAP Enable Now. I've now built here an active area, a bubble, and a rectangle that are going to do something for one of the buttons on this toolbar. Now I've got 15 buttons along here, so I'm going to have to duplicate that for every single button that I want to show its own bubble for explaining what it's about. So nice easy thing here, and this is why I left these numbers the same. Here I've got active area 1, bubble 1, rectangle 1, and I've selected all three of those. Now I'm going to go up to here and I'm going to select this duplicate button, and I'll duplicate that, and that's going to duplicate all three of those objects. You can see now I've now got active area 2, bubble 2, and rectangle 2, and I can drag those and move them to the next object that I want to explain. I've actually got all three selected here, and I'm just going to move it to there. That's probably close enough. And what's the nice feature about this is if you select and duplicate all at the same time three interrelated objects that have events and actions on each other, those events and actions will be retained and updated to refer to these new objects when you duplicate them. So here, for example, this active area 2, we copied this from active area 1, remember. And active area 1 says on mouse roll over, show bubble 1. But active area 2 magically says when you hover over active area 2, show bubble 2. And bubble 2, that magically says show rectangle 2. It automatically recreates those events and the relationship between those objects, which makes doing this a lot easier because I don't have to create multiple ones and then go through and set up the actions for all of them. I just get one set of these three things done, and then I can basically repeat that again. So I set another one here, and let's say we'll move it to over here so we can see the difference. And here I've got active area 3, rectangle 3, and bubble 3. And again, they're all going to refer to each other. So here is referring to bubble 3 is referring to rectangle 3. So it does all of that for me automatically. So that's a really, really nice feature if you have to replicate this same functionality a whole bunch of times. And just to prove it works, I'm going to preview, and we had a hover over on that one, hover over on that one, and this one as well. And the user can quite happily just move along here and see them all. So useful techniques, not really much effort to build those, but it does create a nice effect, and it creates that interactivity, which is also important when we're trying to get our learners to pay attention. So simple stuff. Hopefully you can use that to good effect now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe.